Hello everyone, my name is Krupali Donda and today I will present my PhD dissertation work. But first I would like to welcome you all here. Thank you for being here to attend my PhD defense and it's really exciting for me. My dissertation topic is low frequency absorbing acoustic metasurface, deep learning approach and experimental demonstration. This presentation will be followed in this manner. First, I will talk about context and state of the art, then objectives of this thesis. In the first part of this project, we designed and developed multicoiled metasurface absorber that I will discuss in second section. In third section, we'll talk about deep learning for acoustic metasurface absorber design. In fourth section, we'll discuss forward and inverse designs for omnidirectional incidence. And finally, I will conclude this work and will talk about the future perspective. We all know that noise pollution has become an integral part of our daily lives, and more specifically the low frequency noise, which has adversely impacts on our health and quality of the life. For these reasons, World Health Organization has also considered noise as a crucial factor that impact our human health. Now, various sources of these low frequency noises are: first, transportation. This is mainly concerning to the big cities. Then another sources are industrial machineries, aircraft engines, amplified music and many more. Now, regarding its effect on our health, first, it has great potential to create the annoyance. The prevalence of these annoyance increase with high sound pressure level. Another effects are sleep disturbance, that lack of concentration. There are also some studies that shows the long-term effect of noise on our heart. In a Danish nurse cohort study, they find the evidence that road traffic noise is a risk factor for the cardiovascular disease. Conventionally, various types of absorbers based on porous and fibrous material, gradient index material and microperforated plates were used to control the noise. However, these absorbers are either bulky or structurally weak, and their dimensions are also comparable to the working wavelength, which makes it impractical for the low frequency application. So for all these perspectives, it is necessary to find some efficient mean to control the low frequency noise. Since last 2 decades, the introduction of acoustic metasurface has replaced all the conventional mean to manipulate the sound. It also includes the attenuation and absorption of the sound. Acoustic metasurface are actually 2D materials with subwavelength thickness. The concept of acoustic metasurface is based on the Snell's law. The concept of metasurface was actually introduced first for the optical waves via generalized Snell's law, and inspired by this work and because the acoustic waves also follows the Snell's law, it leads to introduction of acoustic metasurface for controlling the sound waves. The acoustic metasurface concept is based on arrays of subwavelength units that includes the Helmholtz resonator, membranes, and coiling up space structures. Using this kind of structures, various functionalities like reflection, transmission, and absorption can be achieved. Now, regarding the state-of-art low-frequency applications, there is extensive literature available, but here I will emphasize only main 3 approaches. First approach is acoustic metasurface absorber with hybrid resonance. So this is the membrane type of acoustic metasurface. It consists of a membrane, a platelet, a solid surface, and sealed gas. This structure can be characterized using 2 modes. The first is due to this platelet and the second is due to this membrane. Here the sealed gas and solid surface adds the extra impedance in series that results into change in the resonance condition, and due to this, absorption condition can be realized. Using this kind of structure, nearly full absorption was achieved at 152 Hz with total thickness of the system 17 mm, that is just 1 by 133 of the working wavelength. Another way to achieve the extreme low frequency absorption is using slow sound and critical coupling. So here is the structure that shows a thin panel. This thin panel consists of an array of Helmholtz resonator. By controlling the geometrical dimensions, we can tune the intrinsic viscothermal losses in order to compensate the energy leakage. Here, the presence of these Helmholtz resonators produce slow sound propagation and shift the resonance towards the deep subwavelength. Using this structure, full absorption was achieved at 338.5 Hz with the system thickness 1.1 cm, that is just lambda by 88 in terms of the working wavelength. So one more approach is based on coiling up space acoustic metasurface absorber. This concept was proposed by our group in 2016. So here is the system. It consists of two parts. First is perforated plate in front and a spiral channel in back. Here the incident wave penetrates through this hole and propagates inside the spiral channel, and it gets absorbed due to the thermoviscous losses. Using this structure, perfect absorption was achieved at 125.8 Hz with the thickness of 12.2 mm, that is just lambda by 223 in terms of working wavelength. Using this structure, perfect absorption was actually achieved at very low frequency with very small thickness. But there is a problem with this kind of system. This concept is actually based on the quarter wavelength resonator. So the length of channel should be strictly quarter wavelength to achieve the perfect absorption, and this creates the difficulty in adjusting the resonance frequency and also adjusting the bandwidth. So as an extension of this work, the main objective of my PhD thesis is to design ultra-thin acoustic metasurface absorbers for extreme low frequency. Typically for the acoustic designs, we either rely on theoretical approach or numerical simulations. In numerical simulation, starting from the initial condition and setting up proper boundary condition, the solution can be obtained by solving linearized Navier-Stokes equation. With sufficient number of meshes and many iterations, an accurate acoustic response can be derived for a given structure. However, it is frequently needed to fine-tune the geometry and run the simulations iteratively to approach the desired acoustic response. This is okay when we have low degree of freedoms, it means for the simple structures. But as the degree of freedom increases and the design becomes complex, this approach allows exploring only limited design space to find the best structure. This is due to computation power and time constraint. In this dissertation, we identify the solution to these conventional design approaches using modern deep learning architectures. To achieve the low frequency limit of the previously implemented concept, in the first part of this dissertation, we designed ultra-thin metasurface absorbers to achieve extreme low frequency absorption. In the second part, we implemented deep learning driven metasurface absorber designs. We use convolutional neural network for the forward design, and for the inverse designs, we use conditional generative adversarial network. So now moving to the first part of the result, that is multicoiled metasurface absorber. As I discussed before, we had tried several geometries to achieve the extreme low frequency absorption, and finally we end up with this kind of multicoiled metasurface structure. It consists of three parts: perforated plate, circular aperture, and labyrinth structures inside the coiling channel. Here, the circular aperture helps to shift the resonance toward the low frequency up to certain limit. And then we introduce total 11th labyrinth passages inside the coiling channel. It helps to shift the resonance towards extreme low frequency. So here there are two benefits of this kind of structure. First, it fully utilizes the space inside the coiling channel, and it helps to achieve the extreme low frequency absorption without increasing this total thickness of the structure. To study this structure theoretically, we use the lumped RLC circuit model. So here is the equivalent circuit. Here the aperture and perforate plates contributes to essential acoustic resistance and inductance, and the cavity. The cavity is the area between these two labyrinth structure that contributes to essential capacitance. By solving this structure and calculating its impedance, we can get the absorption coefficient by putting the value of impedance in this absorption coefficient equation. Now the perfect absorption can be achieved when these two conditions are fulfilled. Now the majority of the design part for all the designs in this thesis was carried out using the numerical simulation using COMSOL multiphysics. We use acoustic thermoacoustic interface to consider the effect of the thermoviscous losses. So here is the cross section of COMSOL model setup for simulating the multicoiled metasurface absorber. We use the sound hard boundary at the interface of the air and the solid structure because of the huge impedance mismatch. And in the narrow regions, we use the boundary layer mesh to capture the physics accurately. Once the model is set up, we optimize the various geometrical parameters using the parametric sweeps. We use the variables like height of the circular aperture, thickness of the perforated plate, and hole of diameter. So for this value of the geometrical parameters, we get extreme lower frequency absorption at 50 Hz. Further, to study the physics, we simulate the acoustic pressure profile at 50 Hz. So we can see that as we go in the deeper region, the acoustic pressure is increasing. Further, for the acoustic absorption measurement, we fabricate the sample using 3D printer and PLA material in our lab. This first picture shows the internal view of the structure. So it consists of total 11th labyrinth passages inside the coiling channel, and these are the vertical and horizontal view of the structure. For the measurement, we use the two microphone method. First, we fabricate a homemade waveguide to fix the sample at the end of this impedance tube. Here we use two microphones that is used to obtain the amplitude and phase of the pressure distribution. By analyzing the signals from these two microphones, the absorption coefficient can be achieved. So here are the results obtained via all three methods: theory, simulation, and experiments. This plot shows the absorption spectra as a function of frequency. For all these three methods, we can see that perfect absorption is achieved at 50 Hz. At this frequency, the total thickness of the structure is 13 mm, that is just lambda by 527. So it is the thinnest metasurface achieved till now, and the lateral dimension of this structure is 100 by 100 mm. We calculate the path length of the sound wave by calculating the mean distance inside the zigzags, labyrinth structures, and cavities. So the total path length here is lambda by 4.7, which is quite less than lambda by 4. It means that this structure, this system is not actually dependent on the quarter wavelength resonator. To study the bandwidth feature, we use the supercell concept. So here we combine total 9 unit cell in 3 by 3 array. Here each unit cell consists of different diameter value of the hole. It means that each unit cell resonates at the different frequency. The total impedance of this circuit can be calculated using this equation. And here the lateral dimension of this structure is 13 by 30 centimeter and thickness of the supercell is 13 millimeter, same as the previous unit cell. Currently in our lab we do not have facility to measure the absorption of such large structure, so we consider the theoretical and numerical approach. So this plot shows the absorption spectra for the frequency range of 46 to 58 Hz. In both cases, total absorption achieved is more than 90%, but still it is not reached to 1. This is because of impedance mismatch between solid surface, that is structure, and the air. Using this concept, total bandwidth of 8.7% was achieved. So in summary, how we proceed? First, we had a coiling up structure, then we introduced a circular aperture like this, and we get some lower frequency shift up to 92 Hz. So in the summary, how we proceed? First, we had a coiling up space structure, then we introduce a circular aperture like this, and we get some lower frequency shift up to 92 Hz. Then with so many different shapes, we tried to achieve extreme low frequency absorption. For example, we had also tried various shapes of obstacle, and finally we end up with this kind of multicoiled structure and we obtain the absorption at 50 Hz. This whole design process needs lot of trial and error and also previous experience in acoustic designs. And it's always not easy for our human brain to think about such complex designs, and sometimes non-intuitive and irregular shaped structure that can also outperform the empirical design structure. So as a solution of this, we consider deep learning approach to achieve the extreme low frequency absorption using non-intuitive design. So in the second part of this thesis, we implement deep learning for acoustic metasurface absorber designs. Before moving to the implementation, first I would like to give brief introduction of artificial neural network. So artificial neural network is inspired by the human brain activities. When we visualize some object, neurons in our brain tries to detect the object based on the previous information it has learned. So artificial neural network is an attempt to simulate the network of human brain neurons via machines. So here is the schematic of multi-layer perceptron network, which is a kind of traditional neural network. It typically consists of millions of neurons, which can be represented by these circles. These neurons are arranged in layer. First layer is always input layer, from where we give the real world information to the network. This layer is followed by several number of hidden layers. The job of these hidden layers is to process the data in such a way that output unit can understand. So as the data goes from one unit to next unit, the network learns more and more about the information. And at the output side, network responds to data which was given in the input. More specifically, all the neural networks used in this dissertation is based on the convolution neural network. So convolution neural network is simply extension of traditional multi-layer perceptron based on shared weight architecture. So here is the MLP that we saw in the previous slide. In convolution neural network, the hidden layers are known as convolutional layers. So the convolution layer computes the convolution operation on the input data using the kernel filter to extract the fundamental features. Typically, convolutional layers consist of many filters. For example, the filters which are used to detect the edges are known as edge detection filter. Then some filter may detect the another part of data like this. Now, how the deep learning can be useful for the acoustics? So here are the three reasons. First, it used the nonlinear activation functions like sigmoid and ReLU. This use of these functions helps to learn the more complex structures. Currently in physics, the biggest problem of implementation of deep learning network is to generate the large and versatile training data set. So using the data augmentation techniques, it helps to increase the quantity and diversity of training dataset by augmentation techniques like rotating the image, then flipping or cropping like way. The third is that most of the open source platforms allows to use the multiple GPU. It reduces the training and inference time. So we consider this kind of structure. It consists of a perforated plate and random shape of propagation channel inside. This structure can be further represented by dividing with 48 cross 48 lattice sides. Here the blank square shows the area fill up with the air, and the squares with dots represent the area that is fill up with PLA material. Initially, I manually designed such kind of propagation channel in simulation. So here we can observe that as the propagation channel length increases, the absorption shifts towards the lower frequency. So for the neural network, how we define our problem? First, this is the structure. Further, we represent it in 48 cross 48 lattice, and then this can further represented in pattern matrix like this. Here the matrix element is 0 if the lattice site is filled up with air, and it is 1 if that is filled up with PLA. So now this pattern matrix is input for our neural network, and we want the network to learn this function, and it is black box for us, and in output we want the network to predict the spectra. First we implement the forward regression model. Here the aim is that in input we are giving the metasurface structure, and in output we want the network to predict the absorption spectra. So here is the input layer that has shape of 48 cross 48 cross 1 because it is two-dimensional matrix. Then we pass this matrix through convolutional neural network. This network consists of two convolution layer and two pooling layer, that is max pooling layer. Each convolution layer is followed by a ReLU nonlinear activation function. And then we use the max pool layer here. So this max pooling layer helps to reduce the spatial size of the representation to reduce the amount of parameters and computation in the network. So it fastens the training process. Output of the last pooling layer is passed through the flattening layer before feeding it to the fully connected layer, and the output of the fully connected layer is the absorption spectra. Here we use total 10,000 samples for the dataset. Out of this, we use 8,000 for the training of the network, and we reserve remaining 2,000 for the testing purpose. The spectra of our interest is 30 to 70 Hz with the step size of 0.2 Hz. So here is the list of values of optimized hyperparameters. The hyperparameter of the neural networks are the variables which determines the network structure. For example, the number of hidden units, the number of filters, and it also determines how the network is trained. So it determines various training parameters like learning rate, dropout rate, weight initialization. So here are the results. It shows the spectral response for 3 representative cases from the test dataset. So it shows the comparison of the acoustic coefficients obtained via simulation, which is ground truth here, and the curves predicted by the CNN. In the left axis, it shows the value of absorption coefficient, and right axis shows the absolute difference between both simulated and predicted spectra, which is represented here with this green shaded area. For each case, mean square error is shown here in the inset. Here in any of these cases, we can observe that both results match quite well with each other. For the last case, we can see that full absorption is achieved at extreme low frequency of 38.6 Hz. At this frequency, the total thickness of the structure is 13 mm, which is just lambda by 684 in terms of working wavelength. So this is the thinnest metasurface absorber designed till now. Also, the path length here is lambda by 5.7, which is quite less than the quarter wavelength resonance. And here is the corresponding structure for this absorption curve. Now for the acoustic absorption measurement. In our lab, we do not have facility to measure the absorption spectra below 50 Hz. So we considered the another sample and having the absorption little higher, around 66 Hz. So we fabricate this kind of structure. Here is the internal view of this structure. This is the vertical and the horizontal view of the structure. And we measure the absorption spectra using two microphone methods. So this plot shows the comparison of the result obtained via CGAN and the experiment. We can see that for both cases the absorption peak and overall result match quite well with each other. So further, to compare the performance of the implemented CGAN, we implement three other classical machine learning techniques: K nearest neighbor, random forest and SVM. Here we use the accuracy metric to estimate the effectiveness of the model. For example, for the given number of samples, for how many samples a particular algorithm can predict the result with mean square error below 10 raised to minus 4. So here we set the threshold value of MSC as 10 raised to minus 4. And here are the results. We can see that CGAN outperforms the other classical methods with the accuracy of 86%. And here are the values of the optimized hyperparameters in each case. In the previous design we discussed, the only variable is the propagation channel length and its shape. Remaining parameters are constant, and also it is for normal wave incidence only. In the next part, we implement forward and inverse designs for the omnidirectional incident. It allows more degree of freedom in terms of adjusting geometrical parameters. Moreover, in implementing this design, we used advanced deep learning concept that helps to build the robust network architecture. So we considered this kind of structure. It consists of a perforated plate, a circular aperture and random shape of propagation channel. Here the design parameters are height of the structure, aperture size, free from propagation channel and angle of incidence. Now we consider the value of these parameters in this range because it consists of ample samples to achieve the absorption in the given frequency range. The spectra of our interest is 80 to 100 Hz. So for the neural network, we decompose this structure like this in 2D patterns and 1D properties. Here the 2D patterns includes important information about the structure like shape of the propagation channel and diameter of the circular aperture. The 1D properties consist of height of the structure and angle of incidence. Before implementing the neural network, we did some data pre-processing. First, we use image augmentation to increase the quantity and diversity in the training dataset. We use the data augmentation by rotating. For example, in case of normal incidence, this is our sample. Now, if we rotate it in any direction with respect to axis of incidence wave, the absorption response should be same. For example, if we rotate this sample at 90 degree, 180, 260, for all these four cases in case of normal incidence, the absorption spectra is same. So by this way we can increase total number of sample for the training data set without performing the simulation. Further, we did the data rescaling. We rescale all the images in 64 64 cross 64 pixels. This process makes the training of network faster. For the feature extraction, we use principal component analysis. It improves algorithm performance by removing the correlated features. In our case, first 20 components have been used, which explain 96.5% variance. It enables us to reduce the dimensionality of the target from 201 to 20. It means 90% reduction. So first we implemented the forward neural network using convolutional type neural network. So here is the structure. Then we decompose it in 2D images and 1D properties, and then we feed this data into neural network. Our CNN here consists of 3 convolutional and 3 max pooling layers. The output of last pooling layer is processed through batch normalization process. The batch normalization is a technique for training very deep neural networks that standardize the inputs to a layer for each mini batch. This has effect of stabilizing the learning process, and dramatically it reduces the number of training epochs required to train a deep network. Output of the batch normalization is then passed through the flattened layer, and before feeding this data to the fully connected layer, we implement the dropout technique. This technique temporarily deactivates certain neurons in the network as well as all its incoming and outgoing connections. This process generates slightly different models with different neural configuration with each iteration. Here the idea is to disrupt the characteristic learned by the model. So this technique helps to reduce the chances of the overfitting in training of the model. The output of the dropout is then fed to the fully connected layer, and output of the fully connected layer is the absorption spectra. So here are the results from training and ablation analysis. This plot shows the learning curve as a function of epochs for the training and validation phase. So here we can see that as the training goes on, it means as the number of epochs increasing, the loss is decreasing, and after certain epochs, both curves becomes parallel and constant. It means network training is over and curve is converged. This table presents the value of optimized hyperparameters. After this, we carried out ablation analysis. Ablation analysis is usually carried out to check when we change major configuration or remove the part of network, how it affects the network performance. So here we consider 3 cases. First, we considered the base model, which is the actual network we considered and we have already seen in the last slide. Then we considered the case without batch normalization, which is represented here by black curve. So we can see that as compared to the base model, which is represented by this orange curve, the black curve converges little later. This shows the justification of why we use batch normalization here. It helps to make the training process faster. Last, we use the global average pooling layer instead of flattened layer, which is represented here using this blue curve. So we can see that loss is very high and also the curve is highly unstable. So here it is not desirable to use the global average pooling layer. Here are the results. It shows the absorption response as a function of frequency for 2 cases from the test data set. Here the first row shows the results for this structure for 0 degree, 30 degree and 60 degree, and this row shows the result for this structure for 0 degree, 30 degree, 60 degree. We can see that in all cases both the ground truth and coefficients predicted by the neural networks matches quite well with each other. For each case, the mean square error is listed into the inset. For the inverse network architecture, we use the conditional generative adversarial network. The idea of the inverse network is that in input we give the desired absorption spectra, and in output we want the network to generate the particular metasurface structure. So here is the schematic. It consists of two main parts, generator and discriminator. Both these generator and discriminators are actually convolutional type neural network with small difference in their internal structure. So here the generator and discriminators are trained alternatively by competing against each other during the training phase. As a result, both networks improve their prediction until the related counterpart is no longer recognize the proposed data. After this, the discriminator is removed and generator is used to generate the desired structure. Here are the results. The first row shows the sample from the training data set, and the corresponding absorption spectra is shown here by the black curve. The second row shows the corresponding structures which are generated by CGAN. Further, we fed these structures into COMSOL multiphysics to verify the absorption spectra, so which is shown here by red dashed line. So for the comparison, we can see that both curves match quite well with each other. And this table presents the value of optimized hyperparameters. So in the summary, in the first part of this dissertation, we designed multicoiled metasurface absorber using which extreme low frequency absorption was achieved at 50 Hz with the total thickness of the system lambda by 527, which was the thinnest metasurface by that time. In the second part of thesis, we implement deep learning architectures. We implement forward regression model which was for order of magnitude faster than conventional FEM technique. Also, we compare its accuracy with classical machine learning algorithm, and it shows that the CNN outperforms other machine learning techniques with average accuracy of 86%. In the third part, we implement forward and inverse designs for omnidirectional incidence. This networks allows metasurface absorber designs with high degrees of freedom. And using this kind of structure and networks, nearly omnidirectional absorption at 82 Hz with the thickness of lambda by 64 was achieved. Now, future perspective of this work. First, broadband acoustic metasurface absorber design for oblique wave incidence. Till now, for the broadband performance, we use the supercell concept. In this concept, we connect many unit cells with different geometrical parameters. But here, as we increase the number of unit cells, the total size of the supercell increases, and it actually kills the idea of the metasurface. So it is necessary to find some concept to design the broadband acoustic metasurface absorber with the smaller thickness. The second is that the same concepts can be also extended for the acoustic metasurface absorbers for underwater sound absorption. And third is progressive incorporation of state-of-art deep learning approaches. So here I am ending my presentation. Thank you everyone for coming here and for your attention. I wish you a nice day ahead.